Please welcome ALEC National Chairman, Speaker of the Mississippi House of Representatives, Philip Gunn.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's great to see you back today for another day of virtual meeting with at the ALEC annual meeting. We hope you've had a great time so far. We've had some great events so far. Yesterday, we talked about labor policy and vaccines and fiscal responsibility and state budgets. And we got a lot of great information yesterday on how to handle those issues as we all try to deal with this pandemic and how we're going to move forward. Today, we're going to continue that discussion. And we're going to have panels today on regulatory reform. I also want to remind some of our task forces that they will be meeting today at the conclusion of the morning session. We got the Civil Justice Task Force, the Commerce, Insurance, and Economic Development Task Force, Federalism and International Relations Task Forces. All those people will be meeting at the conclusion of this morning's session. You can join those meetings by using the links that appear in the chat box. Today, we want to continue our discussion about the importance of regulatory reform. We want to try to get government out of the way so that people can pursue their careers without restriction and as much freedom as government can possibly give them. We are in the midst of a deregulation renaissance that is empowering the states. And I think most of us would agree that those states that seem to prosper and flourish the most are those that get government out of the way and reduce the amount of regulation that so many states want to put on our citizens. Missouri is one of those states that's leading the way in regulatory reform. They've passed universal recognition for occupational licenses. They're allowing more Americans to get to work in Missouri, which that actually was featured on one of the ALEC podcasts not long ago with State Representative Derek Greer. And Iowa's also passed a universal recognition policy, being the first state to incorporate recognition of workforce in their occupational licensing reform, which can also be found in ALEC model policy on universal recognition is being linked in this session's chat box. So I want to point you to those two resources. These two states have been great leaders in trying to push forward regulatory reform. So joining us today, along with Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds and Missouri Governor Mike Parson, is Brooke Rollins, who's the acting director of the Domestic Policy Council under President Trump. Many of you may remember Brooke from last year's annual meeting in Austin. We're thrilled to have her here today, and we're also thrilled to have these two governors. So I'm going to turn this over to Brooke now, and she is going to lead our discussion with our two governors. Brooke, glad to have you.
It's always so fun to be with all of our friends from ALEC, and obviously my many years running the Texas Public Policy Foundation and being a part of the larger ALEC family. And then, of course, in the last couple of years here at the White House and being involved in most of our major domestic policy issues. Clearly, ALEC continues to be one of our greatest partners, and all of you who are back in the States. I talked about this last year when I spoke in Austin, but the president's vision of returning power to the people and draining the swamp, what that means is returning power back to the states. So thank you all for your leadership on that note and on that, all the collection of issues that we're all working on. Today, though, we're talking about one of our favorites, certainly one of the president's favorites, and that's deregulation. And yesterday, you may or may not have heard, but we had an epic event on the South Lawn. We had about 250 great Americans. Maybe some of you on this Zoom call were there yesterday. And the president was able to talk about his almost 4 years of fighting for the American people and fighting to return power to the states and to the people. We, of course, were properly social distanced, but we had a really great crowd, and the energy and the appreciation that went both ways. Appreciation to the president, the vice president was there, almost our entire cabinet was there to support his vision. And obviously they've been executing on these plans for a couple of years now, but also the appreciation from the president back to the people who were really the fighters. And again, many of you or people you know who were there yesterday, it's pretty remarkable. And when you look at the entire regulatory reform effort that has been undertaken since day one. I like to talk about how the president, then the candidate Trump, came down that escalator in New York City, and I don't know if he did at that moment, but if he didn't, it was soon after. Started talking about government had grown too big, and it was time to return the power to the people and drain the swamp. And at the time, if y'all remember, he talked about the 2-for-1. Under my administration, for every one new regulation, we're getting rid of two. And I remember sitting back in Texas and thinking, wow, that is an audacious, bold goal. Even for the think tankers and the conservative leaders, we'd never really heard a presidential candidate talk that way. And I was amazed and I was encouraged and I was inspired. Of course, little did we know he would end up becoming the president. At that point, I think there were 17 other candidates, but he has held true to that message from almost minute one of jumping in this race. And so yesterday we got to talk a little bit about that and about everything that had happened over the last, again, almost 4 years on that, on the regulatory reform agenda, and really what it means for America. I mean, the average American family now has $3,100 average more in their pockets than they did 4 years ago. When you combine that with the tax cuts, it's more than $6,000 per average American family. And that's just in hard dollars. You look at just the overall quality of life that this initiative, again, supported and led by so many of you in the States, is really a game changer. And we're really, really, really proud. But one thing we really tried to get across yesterday was that while it helps all people, the Americans that the deregulatory agenda helps the most are those at the lowest part of our income socioeconomic ladder of our income classes. And so that is a story I know that we as conservatives and as you all as elected officials in your states, that's a story we have to continue to tell and to be really out front on. That while regulatory reform continues to be cast and defined by the left and by leaders of the left as just an effort to help, the rich people in America, that ultimately those who are helped the most truly are at the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder. And under a re-regulation, which is what many on the left are talking about right at this moment, and sort of, no, I don't want to say rolling back because that's what we're doing, but putting back in place all the regulations that we have moved out over the last 4 years. In doing so, the very people you hurt the most are those that are having to choose every day between heating their home, buying their food, whether they can afford a car. And that's where all of those previously heavily regulated industries, that's where the costs go up. And so for all of our single moms who are trying to raise their kids in certain vulnerable communities around the country, it is this initiative that allows you to have more and have a better shot at the American dream. So that's a really important part of this. Before I turn it over to our two awesome governors we have who've been real leaders on this, I want to just do a quick clip through some of our highest and best and I think most valuable regulatory reform efforts that have been undertaken. Just to put it all together, it's pretty astonishing when you look at it as a whole. First, of course, the Waters of the United States rule that threatened American landowners with taking their land in endless litigation. We had a rancher here yesterday talking about that rule. Second, replacing the previous administration's harmful CAFE fuel efficiency standards for vehicles with our much improved safe vehicles rule. That rule saves a couple $1,000s per car. We're very proud of that. Talked about that yesterday. Third, the previous administration's Clean Power Plan for all of my friends back in Texas and in Pennsylvania and Ohio and so many states around this country. We knew that that Clean Power Plan would devastate our energy industries and would require or cause millions of lost jobs. Of course, the president focused on that from day one. Number four, and we just announced this Wednesday in Atlanta, our NEPA rule, the National Environmental Policy Act, which has not been changed in over 40 years. This president wanted to make it a priority and did. Again, many others have tried and weren't able to do so. So we're really proud of that. Of course, that modernizes and accelerates environmental reviews under NEPA, which ensures that roads and bridges and tunnels and highways will be built much faster at a lesser cost. And of course, getting the communities moving again, especially those who are mired in traffic. Talking about quality of life here. Number five, modernizing the hours of service with our American truckers, which was a big deal. Number six, getting rid of the ridiculous Obama era incandescent light bulb rule, which again, for those of you in major public policy, may not spend much time thinking about light bulbs, but when you go home to your wife or your husband and they are thinking about light bulbs, that's a big one. Number 7, working to restore internet freedom, overturning the burdensome net neutrality rules. Number 8, the Labor Department's joint employer rule. We took action to revise that, the first action in 60 years. Number 9, the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. All of the work done in the first couple of years here to expand access to alternatives like the American Health Plan and short-term limited duration plans, very important. And to round out the top 10, by no means does this mean there weren't many other amazing ones, but streamlining the regulatory process and active management of America's forest and rangelands, which I know to our friends in the West was a huge deal. So again, I just want to thank you all for your incredible support. Know that while we have done a lot, I think the first year we were at 22 to 1. Right now we're averaging almost 8 to 1 for every 1 new regulations, 8 go out the door. But we're doing nothing more than doubling down on that entire effort. And we believe so strongly in what it stands for and how important it is. And in fact, last December, we launched our governor's initiative on regulatory innovation, led by our vice president, chaired by our vice president, Mike Pence. And the effort there is, how do we help you all back in the states continue that regulatory reform agenda to help all Americans, but especially those with the least among us? And 2 of our greatest champions are here with us today, Governor Kim Reynolds and Governor Mike Parson. I'll first introduce Governor Reynolds. She'll give a couple of comments about what they have done in Iowa, hopefully give some of you out in the ALEC world some great ideas, and then we'll talk to Governor Parson. So Governor Reynolds, of course, became the 43rd governor of Iowa in 2017, serving as lieutenant governor before that. She has signed comprehensive occupational licensing reform that is allowing for universal recognition of out-of-state licensing for most licensed profession. What she's been able to do on reciprocity for military spouses is extraordinary indeed. And really her focus on this has been laser-like and very impressive. One of the superstars, obviously, of the movement, one of the superstar governors. Please help me welcome Kim Reynolds.
Thank you, Brooks. I appreciate that very kind introduction. It's great to be with you. I can speak from the Midwest. The WOTUS reform was a big deal to our farmers and producers in conjunction with all of the other list of regulatory reform that you just went through. I want to say thanks to Alex for giving me the opportunity to join you today. And I really want to say thank you to you and your members. The work that you're doing across the country is critical, and it's truly much appreciated. Speaker Gunn and Governor Parsons, it's great to be with you on this panel as well. And to all the elected officials with us today, thank you. The past few months truly have been trying times for everybody, and your willingness to continue to work and sacrifice on behalf of our fellow citizens is greatly appreciated. And Brooks, I want to say thanks to you. I love your energy, and I've long admired the work that you do. I actually had the opportunity to meet with Brooke and her team at the White House recently, and honestly, the breadth of issues that they're going to tackle, it's impressive, and I want to tell you, it's very exciting. President Trump and his entire administration have been champions from day one, as Brooke just listed, on common sense solutions to get government out of the way of the everyday lives of Americans. And I know that the work that Brooke, that you and your team you're doing is paramount to that effort. And I also have no doubt that the administration's support of licensing reform played a role in helping us get our bill across the finish line. Not to mention that governors are extremely competitive. And so Governor Ducey and Governor Parsons kind of laid down the gauntlet, and that's really fighting words for the rest of us to get in there and get that good work done. You know, I think we all can agree that a rigorous professional licensing system to protect the health and safety of our people in our communities is appropriate. But when that system becomes excessive and it becomes burdensome and it disproportionately impacts the working class and it makes it more difficult and expensive to really earn a living and have the opportunity to fill a high demand job that we have available in all of our states, changes need to be made. And I'll give you one example. And I talked about this. I actually had the individual there when I signed the bill that we just passed with here in Iowa. He was an individual and his family that had moved to Iowa. He was an HVAC technician. He had a degree. He had 5 years of experience. He was a member of the South Dakota National Guard. He'd actually earned an award during a tour in Afghanistan for his work installing conditioners. But when he moved to Iowa, the process to get his journeyman's license, it was so complex that it was actually easier for him to get licensed in Kansas because we had reciprocity and it was accepted in Iowa. So, I mean, that is unacceptable. And honestly, prior to COVID, Iowa had an economy that was booming. We had one of the lowest unemployment rates in the country. We're at 2.3%. We had a strong housing market. We literally had jobs looking for people, and workforce continued to be the biggest barrier to economic growth in our state. And so we were looking at all opportunities to remove barriers and licensing reform was one of those. As Brooke said, we laid the groundwork for occupational license reform by starting with military spouses. It was just truly unconscionable that how many roadblocks that were in place that prevented military spouses from finding good employment as their spouse was deployed around the country. So in 2019, I signed into law a bill that allowed reciprocity for active duty military members to get expedited professional licensing in the state of Iowa. And I'm proud to say that that bill did pass unanimously in both chambers. And so this year we took another major step forward in reforming professional licensing by signing House File 2627. And again, as Brooke said, it creates additional pathways and again removes barriers to professional licensure in the state of Iowa. It allows new Iowa residents with an out-of-state license that's in good standing to use their skills and training and to get the same licensed profession in Iowa without additional red tape. So it really expedites that process. And we're the first state in the country to recognize 3 years of work experience as a substitute for education, training, and work experience requirements. So I'm really proud that we were able to get that done. I know the legislature worked really hard to get that piece added. And it waives initial licensing fees. Again, we're trying to remove barriers for first-time applicants of families earning less than 200% of the federal poverty level. And it creates a uniform standard for review for denial of licensure based on a person's conviction history. So I want to give a shout out to Senator Brown and Representative Lundgren, who were instrumental in getting this legislation passed. It was one of my top priorities that I talked about in the condition of the state, and I had a ton of Republican allies in both chambers really determined to get this done. We know we have more work to do. I hate to say this, but a fourth of our workers need a license from the state to do their job. And again, that is unacceptable. And so over the interim, we're really bringing a group together and we're going to be looking at all professions that require licensing. And we're going to make sure that the license that we have in place are there solely to protect the health and well-being of our citizens. So we've been working on this for a while, and we're hoping next year we can take another big step forward and really reduce and bring those numbers down. One last thing too that we just got recognized for, and it deals with regulations as well. The Mercatus Group recently ranked Iowa #1 in COVID-19 health policy recommendations that increase access to healthcare. And again, I dealt with those through the health emergency declaration. And we're hoping that a lot of those that we were able to eliminate to help provide that additional access is something that we can make permanent through legislation. So I look forward to working with the legislature on that as well. We love to say that in Iowa, opportunity lives here, and we want to ensure that all Iowans have access to rewarding careers and access to the opportunities that living in this great state provides. So we're going to continue removing barriers to high demand jobs, and some of the legislation that we've just passed is a key component of that. So again, I want to end by giving a big thank you to ALEC. And I also would like to thank an Iowan that you're lucky to have on your ALEC board, and that is former Speaker of the House, Linda Upmeyer. She's a good friend. She's going to be missed at the Capitol, and I don't think, we can't thank her enough for her service to the great state of Iowa. She has a servant's heart, and she's been a role model to many and has made a big impact in the state of Iowa. So with that, I'll turn it back to, I think, Brooke.
Governor, thank you so much. And by the way, while we're talking about great Iowans, I would like to note that the head of our IGA, our Intergovernmental Relations, is Doug Holscher, another great Iowan, who is just one of the superstars here at the White House, and his team is extraordinary. And I know, I think that's who really organized this and got me connected for this event today with you, ALEC. And I'll say one quick thing before I introduce Governor Parsons. The governor's initiative on regulatory innovation, chaired by Vice President Pence, that I mentioned, that is doing such great work. We talked about it at the White House yesterday at the big event. We would still love, I think we now have almost 400 champions, even though it's called the Governor's Initiative. We welcome all local, state elected officials, federal elected officials, tribal elected officials. So if you're not signed up yet, let our IGA team know, and we'd love to get you involved. It's semi-regular phone calls, events at the White House, but most importantly, what ALEC does so well, but hopefully helping to facilitate great ideas across this great country. And speaking of that, another great executors of great ideas across this great country is our next speaker, Missouri Governor Mike Parson, who has basically been helping lead Missouri for many, many years. Before that, he was, I believe, in the Army. Yep, he served in the U.S. Army for 6 years and was a sheriff. But truly, talking about a servant's heart, it is Governor Parson. It was great to have him in my office just a few days ago, sitting under the Texas flag. But he said he welcomed that. But anyway, please help me welcome Governor Parson.
All right. Good morning, everyone. What a great opportunity to be able to speak to everybody this morning. And first of all, let me say it is a tough act to follow when you've got Brooke out there and you got Governor Reynolds in front of you, two superstars in their own right. So great to be on with them this morning. I want to thank ALEC for everything they do. A lot of times us governors, I might as well just kind of confess right off the bat. You're the think tank. You guys are to come up with a lot of great ideas for us to take and run with, and then we get to implement that in our state. So I want to thank ALEC for everything they do. I want to thank my Missouri delegation that's there, and what a year they've had when it comes to reciprocity in our state. So proud of that, to get to do some of the things that we've done this year. The other thing I want to thank Speaker Gunn for being moderating this panel this morning, for doing what he does every day. And I want to thank the president and the vice president, both the first lady and the second lady, because they've been involved in all aspects of this. And actually, the second lady gave me a little spring in my step, I guess I want to say, earlier on when I met at their residence when it comes to military reciprocity. And what Governor Reynolds said a while ago was so important for me. I got the privilege of doing both this year. The first bill I signed into law in Missouri was the military reciprocity, full reciprocity. And then later in the session, with the work of the legislatures, we did full reciprocity, which really goes into the fact when Governor Reynolds said, she mentioned Governor Ducey and then Governor Reynolds, and I'll mention her now, good conservative Republican governors with good leadership. Look, we push each other every day, and that's a good thing. When she talks about being competitive, you're darn right. I'm looking and seeing what Arizona, what Iowa does and saying, okay, how can I make that better? And I think that's what we do as leaders is we push each other to make sure we can do things better every day. And just before you even get to the reciprocity piece that I'll talk about in Missouri, I think it's important when we go through a crisis like we have COVID-19. It's tough enough for all of us to go through a crisis, and it's been a tough time. Trust me, if you're a governor, it's been a tough time the last 4 months, but it also makes you better. And let me just say that things when we talk about deregulation, and Brooks was talking about what the president done, I want to say, and Governor Reynolds will be the same way, I think, with this, but we probably waived over 600 regulations in the state of Missouri during this time. You know what you really realize? Once you got that out of the way, businesses could do a better job. People could do a better job. Once you get the regulatory environment out of there, and for the everyday person, they probably had no idea that you took 600 regulations off the book. So the thing we should all learn about this, especially through ALEC and through the legislators, is to make sure when we go back, really start cleaning these regs up that we don't need, and that it's a hindrance for businesses and for private individuals. Those are real issues that really matter to everyday people's lives out there. So, and I think some of the things, a lot of things that Kim mentioned, we've done in Missouri and the reciprocity, but a couple of things I want to add to that. One of the things she gives a time frame of 3 years, and I guess again that's where that competition gets in. I'm saying, okay, can we narrow that 3 years down to 1 or 2? And those are the things we did in Missouri to make that opportunity. But we should never punish people through the regulatory environment to go out and make a living, that to get a job, to have a license, and to make it so burdensome that, and through the cost factor, through the regulatory environment, you can't even hardly get one. A couple of pieces in ours that's different than most states that I hope that everybody will take a good look at. One of it really has to do with what we call a Fresh Start program. And it actually has to do with people that has committed crimes, where they've committed felons or committed crimes, that they can now go back out and get a license if that crime had nothing to do with what the licensing process is. You can do things like that, regardless what your education level is. You know, if you've been out there and you've been working in an arena or a field where you need a license for it and you're good at it and you're providing that service, why should you not have an opportunity to have a license when it's just out there, you're dedicating yourself just to hard work? Those things are important, and they go back to the key element of our administration. Was the two things we started out with was infrastructure and workforce development. That's why reciprocity fits right into workforce development. The whole idea is to get people out there working, give them the opportunity to go to work, and give them as many lanes that they can go down, many avenues as they can to get into the workforce. And I think that's exactly what you've seen us do by even going back through K through 12 and start explaining to high school students what opportunities they have, what is the job market is, what is the license prospect out there, and how do we make that easier for them to get into business or get to the training cycles that are on that. But anytime that you can deregulate the reciprocity for full reciprocity, and you really put people back to work, is really what this is all about. And I think, again, that goes back to conservative values that we all believe in, but we got to implement this. And, you know, the one thing I was thinking as we talk through this, there's only like 3 or 4 states that's done this. This is pretty well a no-brainer. I mean, the only people that's going to give you pushback on this is the special interests, the lobbyists and everything. The everyday citizen's going to be on our side. And I think sometimes we need to go back and remember what that everyday person out there is feeling, what they're going through, especially at times like this. And, you know, and we need to step up the plate and get things done for them. And I think this is a perfect opportunity. When you start with the president and the vice president and work your way down to the state levels, it's where Republican governors need to step up, and they need to lead, and they need to follow suit. Because the one thing we mentioned, and Brooke mentioned that earlier on her opening statements, look where we were at in January and February with good leadership when we were talking about infrastructure, when we was talking about jobs, we was talking about workforce development. Federal tax cuts, state tax cuts for us, put more people in money in their pockets, being able to move forward. Unemployment at record lows in the state of Missouri. We were looking for business, looking for people to try to fill opportunities in the workforce. Businesses were coming to our state. We were expanding. All that opportunity is still out there. It is still out there, even with the virus that we're dealing with. All those opportunities will be there. We're going to get ahead of the virus. We'll get that under control, and we're gaining on it every day. But we have to stay focused on the policies of what ALEC stands for, what the president's office stands for, and stay in line with that, because we know they work. They're proven to work. We just got to get back to that. So it's a great opportunity to see everybody today. Great opportunity to be in there with my neighbor, Governor Reynolds, which I think the world of. She's doing a great job. And for Alex and Brooke, keep up the good work. I know you got that Texas flag behind you. I'm at Southwest Baptist University here in Missouri, my hometown, with that flag behind me that means the world to me for serving in the military and serving in law enforcement for 22 years. So great to be on this morning.
Well, thank you, Governor Parson. This is Speaker Gunn here. I want to thank both Governor Reynolds and Governor Parson for their great remarks. Governor Parson said something that really resonated with me. He said, we don't want to punish people for trying to make a living. And I think that's what occupational licensing laws serve to do so many times, is to punish people and prevent a barrier for them from working. And so I think that really encapsulates what we're trying to address here. I am privileged to lead a panel discussion this morning. I have about 5 questions here that I've been given, and I want to present to our panelists and get their response. So, Governor Reynolds, we'll start with you. The first question I have here is, what does the occupational licensing reform law that you signed mean to your state?
Well, as I indicated earlier, our biggest barrier to economic growth in the state of Iowa was workforce. And so this is a win-win for everybody and really aligns with all the other initiatives that we've been working on. This helps Iowans secure a good job. It makes the process easier by removing barriers. And it helps our employers that are growing and providing those opportunities get the workforce that they need. And it really does align with our Future Ready Iowa initiative, our registered apprenticeship programs, our STEM initiative, our second chances. And it's all about providing opportunities and growing the economy in the state of Iowa. So we're excited to continue to see our economy rebound. We're in our growth phase of addressing with COVID. We started with stabilize. We moved quickly to recover. And I just launched a Governor's Economic Recovery Task Force that brought in CEOs and just a whole host of individuals that can really talk about how we can continue to do things like occupational license reform and continue to move our state forward. So I'm excited about the opportunities, and I'm excited to continue to work on it.
Thank you, Governor Reynolds. Governor Parson, same question to you. What does it mean to your state?
It means everything to our state. I mean, you see what the president, when I was talking about how well we were doing with the economy and doing the license reciprocity to give people more the opportunity to go back into the workforce, into the job markets. That's what it's all about. And you know, there's a perfect time to do it when all of a sudden we see what was going on across the United States, what momentum we had. You know, it's pretty hard to stop that train when it's going down the track as fast as it was. And I think full reciprocity is just another one of those avenues to be able to meet the challenges of tomorrow. And I think by doing what we've done before this, you know, and going through this crisis that we are, you can see what it really means now. It's going to help us to ignite the economy again in every state. And I guarantee you other states are going to be out there looking at what we've done in these three states and going to say, wait a minute, they've got a little bit of advantage over us. We got to pick up the pace here and get this thing done.
Absolutely. Thank you. Brooke, I got a couple more questions for the governors, and then I'll get a question for you. What were the challenges that you faced in getting the occupational licensing reform accomplished, and how did you overcome them? Governor Reynolds?
Yeah, well, Governor Parsons really hit on this. It is a special interest groups, including, you know, industry protectionists and existing licensing boards, to be honest, was a little bit of our issue moving forward. And to Mike's point, it just takes leadership, and it takes a legislature that's willing to stand up and fight for what's right. And I am so proud of the Republicans in the House and the Senate. And I'm telling you, majorities matter and make a difference. Because of their leadership, we were able to work together and continue to move this forward in a pretty timely manner. So, you know, you got to do the right thing. And to Mike's point too, this is what the citizens expect, and it's about giving them opportunities. And I'm just appreciative again for the leadership and partnership with the legislators to get this done.
Okay, thank you, Governor. Brooke, I got one last question for you. How have you worked to encourage other governors and states to take up occupational licensing reform?
Well, thank you. And I appreciate the opportunity to sort of wrap it a little bit. But what I would say is, you know, we talked about the governor's initiative on regulatory innovation chaired by Vice President Mike Pence. That has been awesome. We also, a couple times a year, bring the governors to the White House. And we've talked a lot about occupational licensing and regulatory reform during those meetings. We've done a lot of one-offs. Just yesterday, we had a roundtable organized by our great team at IGA with a couple other governors, Governor Dunleavy of Alaska and Governor Little of Idaho. Governor DeSantis just had a huge win on occupational licensing for all the Floridians. I'm sure many of you were part of that. I think just yesterday or the day before, the Wall Street Journal wrote a big piece about it, maybe this morning. It is really a train that is leaving the station and is becoming, you know, just has so much momentum. The one thing I would say, though, is this can be and is and should be a bipartisan issue. And so we have worked with Democrat governors as well here at the White House from Colorado and Pennsylvania and a few other places. And just like criminal justice reform, it really is an issue that should reach across the aisle, which I know America doesn't necessarily think we do very well. Certainly in Washington, the states may be a little bit better, but there are real opportunities to partner and come together and really show America that we can do its best for all of our people, but especially those who need it the most. So thank you guys for having me. It's just always an honor to be with ALEC.
Well, it's great to be with all three of you, and I want to congratulate Brooke on all of her hard work in this area and also on your recent promotion within the Trump administration. So thank you so much for leading on this effort. It's people like you that make this happen. the governors
Well,
and
thank you.
people like me have so many other things that we have to address, but it takes people like you devoting their time and attention to this situation to get it across the finish line. So, Brooke, I want to congratulate you and thank you for your work here. I want to thank our two governors, outstanding governors, for the examples that they have set for leading the way on this issue. We commend both of you, and thank you so much for giving us your time this morning. It's been a great panel. I thank all three of you for participating.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.